Welcome back. Today's lecture will be on the German and Irish migrations of the early to mid-19th century. On the course calendar, this is called the pre-industrial period. That's not to say there was no industry, but I want to separate that because after the Civil War, we'll see that the Industrial Revolution really takes off. Last week, or last lecture, we talked about the demographic transition, and I hope I left you with the idea that this population growth and industrial growth, the changes in the population, the changes in technology, were both symptoms of each other, chicken and egg kind of thing. One caused the other caused the one. If we stick with that disease metaphor, then the virus that carried both the industrialization as well as the population change would have been capitalism. Capitalism is what's growing and changing here, and I alluded somewhat to the ways in which capitalism was going to cause certain changes in the U.S., which were going to rebound in Europe, resulting in more immigration, which in turn would exacerbate those changes. And that's largely the story that we'll tell today, at least of the German migration. The story of the Irish migration will be a little bit different. The main points, though, that mass migration in the 19th century was the result of a pre-industrial people confronting a new capitalist world order. I think that's a pithy way of seeing it. As we look at both the German and Irish migrants, we'll see very different people, very different kinds of capitalist order that they are confronting, but their worlds are changing, and one of their reactions to this is migration. The German and Irish migrants are what we will focus on because they make up 2/3 of the pre-industrial immigration, and also because the two groups are so different. So in a sense, they can be kind of archetypal. The Germans, together with the Scandinavians, are the archetypal rural-to-rural migrants, as we'll see. They start out rural, and they settle, for the most part, in rural America. Now, this is, of course, like everything in this class, a big generalization. There are certainly Germans and Scandinavians who come from rural areas and settle in cities during this time, and not particularly small numbers of them either. But overall, if you had to guess, if you knew only that somebody was a rural-to-rural migrant, you wouldn't go too far wrong guessing that they were German or Scandinavian. Right? Irish, on the other hand, very seldom wind up in rural areas. Again, it's a generalization, but particularly after the famine or during the famine, the Irish just are not equipped for starting farms. So they're the quintessential. Well, they're not. I would not. While the Germans and Scandinavians I would call archetypal rural-to-rural migrants, the Irish are a certain type. They're a unique case, as we'll see, but a very important one because they comprise so much of the migration stream, and because of how they adapt to their new urban settings. All right, so we're going to start first with the German story. That would be German and, to some extent, Scandinavian, and then after we get through this, then we'll go on to the Irish story. I want to talk first about the demography and economy. That's essentially the story that we focused on, that I alluded to in the previous lecture. That's what's happening to rural people in Europe in the early part of the 19th century, and why it might make them want to migrate. There are 3 different cases that I want to talk about. They're not all that different, but they give a sense of the flavor. First, in southwestern Germany, we'll talk about the dwarf economy, and then I think we'll not do it in quite this order. We'll talk about proto-industrialization in Westphalia, and then the way landlessness works in Scandinavia. All of those features drive the migration from Germany. We will, to some extent, talk a little bit about wars, crop failures, revolution, political repression, but less so, and even less so here again, about religious persecution. Religious persecution will be a big part of the Irish story, but not so much of the German story. When you read Daniels on this subject, he will point out correctly that the German migration contains not only Lutherans and Reformed Protestants of various sorts, but also Jews and later on Catholics particularly in the later part of the century. But religious persecution is not a big reason for their migration at this time, as it was earlier in the 1600s. But by now it's really not so much, and that's why I rendered it in this meaningful, smaller type. Okay. I want to sum the whole story of Germans up with this phrase, radical attempt to conserve. That's a phrase coined by historian Mack Walker, and I think it sums up neatly this notion of what's happening to these German and Northwestern European peasants, of how they are facing difficult new situations, and they take radical measures in order to conserve what they feel they have, or what they feel they're in danger of losing. All right. If we have a little bit of time, we'll talk about settlement patterns and occupation and cultural persistence, but it's probably we may not get to that. First, to get a sense of how significant these two migration streams were, let's take a look at this table. What this shows are the arrivals from Germany and Ireland as fractions of all arrivals. The data started in 1820 because the Passenger Act of 1819 mandated for the first time that bureaucrats start to count immigrants. So it's not like there were no immigrants before 1820. We just don't have as clear an idea of how many. I just used the word immigrant, but we should also point out that as the graph's title, these are arrivals. They're counting arrivals. We don't know how many of these people. Later on, in the 20th century, a person who arrives is much more easy to categorize as a visitor or an immigrant, somebody with an intention to stay, because they'll have to have a visa. At this point, they do not. So people arrive, people come, and people go. And historians have estimated that something like 1/3 of the people who show up during the 19th century go back. So these may overcount the number of people who actually stay, but nonetheless, these are large numbers. Particularly, actually, you can actually tell that these are large numbers. What you can tell from this graph is that the Irish and Germans comprise a large fraction of all immigrant streams. It's about 80% at the peak there. But add to this the knowledge that during the 1800s, typical year, the migration stream would account for, or arrivals would be between 1 and 1.5% of the resident population at the time. Okay, so if that were the case today, we would see 3 or 4 times as many immigrants as a fraction of our current population. And today, 1 million immigrants is roughly 1/3%. At this point, it would have been 1.5% of the residents. So you can see that immigrants they're noticed now, right? But in this period, they would be even more obvious. They would have made even a bigger impression on the receiving society. And this is the period when that fraction is highest. Right? This is the time when, if you will, immigrants are the most noticeable. Now, throughout the century, remember there are 33 million who arrived. So It's not like the stream falls off. You might get the impression, looking at this, that the immigration stream subsides towards the end of the century, but that's misleading because this is just a fraction of all arrivals. What happens is that the Germans and Irish are simply replaced by people from Southern and Eastern Europe. And we'll talk about that another day. But the real point is that there are a lot of Germans and a lot of Irish that are arriving in the early part of this century, and that's why they're worth talking about. We can see from these are arrivals of Germans, and it's hard to see in this the immigrant cycle that we talked about. Remember that stylized fact of immigration starting and then peaking and then falling. But remember, this is immigration data or arrival data rather than immigration. The immigrant cycle is the story of people leaving, not people arriving. The Germans are going to other places as well as the United States. We lose track of that as Americans. But this graph's also affected by a lot of year-to-year variation that you wouldn't see if you looked at it by decade. And also, there are economic depressions in the 1840s. There are in the 1870s and the 1890s, and there is that civil war around 1860 here. So there are lots of other events that show up rather starkly in annual data like that. But nonetheless, even with all of those caveats, I think if you squint enough, you can kind of see that there is more or less a pattern, which disappears after 1900 when all of this is really much more governed by legislation. We'll understand that later. Okay, so our first German immigrant story is 1820s onward. Baden-Württemberg, Palatine. These are the regions over here that are in red. This is southwestern Germany, and this is an area that's characterized as the dwarf economy. And what's happened here is similar to what we'll see is happening also in Ireland. The population is rising, but at this point, there's not a whole lot of things to do in this economy except for agriculture. So, as the populations rise, land holdings get smaller and smaller, and that puts pressure on these ever smaller landholders. It becomes harder and harder to make a living as a farmer. At this point, then, some of those Ravenstein observations come into effect, and we'll see that it's largely the better off in the society that begin migration. This region, by the way, also has a fair number of Jews, so Jews are among the earlier German migrants. But again, as Daniels points out, that Jews are very well integrated at this point in German society, so it's not obvious. There's no obvious way to count them. The U.S. Census doesn't ask, and their names are not particularly different. So we know that there were plenty of Jews here. We know that there were Jews in the migrant stream, but precise figures are hard to come by. But as we'll see, it's the very large Jewish migration stream is from Eastern Europe at the end of the century. It's not the German Jews at the beginning. There are some. It's worth pointing out here that in the 1820s, this is the aftermath of the Napoleonic Wars. Napoleon is the end game of the French Revolution, and with his demise at Waterloo in 1815, the Congress of Europe, actually the Congress of Vienna, was held, and Germany came under the sway, unofficially, of Clemens von Metternich, who's an Austrian foreign minister. Recall that all these German states are a very loose confederation. They're not powerful states, but Metternich has some secret police here, and he's concerned about the ideas of the French Revolution. So there is some political repression going on as part of that story, but it's more of the story as we get to the 1840s, the famous 1848 revolutions. All right? The main story with the dwarf economy is the population increases, inheritance rules are following from Napoleon, partible, thus farms becoming smaller and smaller and less efficient, and there aren't a lot of alternatives. That's basically the story. Proto-industrialization in Westphalia, we're still in the West. This is kind of the next phase, whether there's a huge distinction or not. I wouldn't say it's a huge distinction, but the proto-industrialization story is that as industrialization begins, there's a lot of putting out work. So Westphalia, like the Palatine, this is a region where there are lots of farms, and the farms are getting smaller. But what happens here is, with the onset of industrialization and the possibility of cottage work, particularly women begin working on industrial pursuits, let's say, mostly cloth making. But it's another way of making a living. And what that means is that population can grow further. So in the proto-industrialization story, the peasants are sort of caught in the crosswinds of capitalism because in this early phase, and particularly while Napoleon is in charge, because he has eliminated trade with England, there's a lot of little cloth-making industry at home. But with the end of the Napoleonic Wars and with the dramatic growth of textiles everywhere, textile manufacture everywhere, this becomes fairly suddenly uneconomical. Cloth that's made in factories is much cheaper and probably better, I don't know. But these industrial opportunities dry up, and so the peasants in Westphalia are kind of stuck, again, not just watching their farms grow, but their livelihoods are actually being reduced. So again, there's a strong incentive to migrate. And again, as Ravenstein would suggest, we'll see that it's not the poorest, it's the people who have some substantial means that see the dark clouds forming. They're the ones who go first. The interesting difference in Scandinavia is with retirement contracts, where inheritance is generally partible in at least Western Germany. In Scandinavia, the typical pattern is that the eldest son would inherit the farm, but along with it, he would inherit it in a curious way. In the Nordic countries, they had what has been translated as retirement contracts. So the eldest son would get the land, but he would also get the responsibility for taking care of his parents, and he would have to compensate his other siblings for it. So it's just another flavor of this descent brought on by capitalism. Because while traditionally this has been a pretty good deal for the eldest son, because the eldest son gets the farm, and the farm is the way you make a living, it's harder and harder to make a living on a farm. And now the eldest son is getting the farm along with a mortgage because he's got to pay off his siblings. And so it's a tougher life. And his siblings now have an option. They have a little bit of cash, so they tend to migrate. So at the beginning of the period, it's a scary thing to be the second or subsequent sibling. But by the end of the 19th century, it's a drag to be the oldest son, because the oldest son is stuck taking care of mom and dad. But again, it's the same sort of story. We have this combination of declining opportunities in agriculture and the possibility of migrating. And as I said, these are agriculturalists. They have a little bit of money, so they seize the opportunity and become agriculturalists in the U.S. Yes. Largely because grain prices are falling during this period. Remember the transportation revolution story that I told last time? These guys have to compete with Iowa now. And, it gets cold in Iowa, that's true, but try Sweden. It's harder to grow crops here than in lots of other places. Plus, land is still cheaper in the U.S. Okay. What this graph shows is and not terribly well, is the idea that there's a diffusion going on here. That we don't just have pure economic effects. We have places that start to send migrants, and then the places nearby send migrants. Again, following on the point that I made in the last lecture, that there are things besides the simple economics of the story. That it's people knowing people. It's the way information spreads that also affects how these things go. Skip Sven. But I think we can sort of sum up the German story is fairly well captured by this quote from Gottfried Duden in 1827. Gottfried Duden is, of course, a German immigrant, and he is writing back. How many men there are in Germany who have funds amounting to 4,000 to 6,000 thaler without any other prospect than to use them for living expenses? But this sum is more than abundant to provide a happy life for an entire family on the banks of the Missouri. Even if 800 to 1,000 should be spent on traveling expenses. Such a financial situation is very common in Germany among persons who are forced by what is called propriety and decorum to make expenditures that, without providing pleasure for the present, veil the future with anxiety. With the above-mentioned sum, the immigrant can buy 2 adult slaves, one male, one female, which cost about 1,200 Prussian thaler, and establish himself in such a manner that he can live more happily, and especially in regard to the future, lot of numerous descendants, with many less worries than if he possessed 6 times that amount in Germany. So, I want to suggest that this is that if you're making a movie called Ravenstein's Laws, Dune would be from central casting, wouldn't he? This sum is more than abundant, but remember that line about veil the future. He's got all these fears of the right, the veil the future with anxiety. So he's talking. These are the people who are not again. Of course, he thinks there are actually quite a lot of them. He puts a fairly precise figure on exactly what it takes to come to America. And look how quickly he's adapted to American customs. The above-mentioned sum, the immigrant can buy 2 adult slaves. That I think that's interesting. I think I find that jarring, don't you? There's not a lot of hand-wringing about that. Just got the money, buy the slaves. Doesn't even mention buying land first, although he does mention buying land in this piece. I edited it. Okay. Yes. World Bank? No, World Bank is after World War II. Another 150 years or so.
How different can currency exchange?
Well, you don't need a World Bank to have currency exchange rates. Anytime there's commerce between 2 countries, there will be an exchange rate established. This would have probably been done. There were definitely banks. I don't think it was a huge problem to do this. But there isn't a lot of currency at this time either. So I'm not entirely certain of the details, I have to say. But I don't think that was a huge issue. All right. So we have a sense now of how it was if you were German or Scandinavian at this time. There's a sense of opportunity, and there are lots of these this kind of account from immigrants in this period. There's quite a few who have survived. That some wildly optimistic, some much less so. But this information is very much available in Europe. That opportunities exist, and there is, as Duden suggests, a fairly large number of people who are in that middle stratum of society who are just barely making it, but who have 4 or 5 kids now, and don't see how their kids can make it, right? Because all they have is this small amount of land. So people who are in places where their land is easily sold tend to that makes it very possible for them to sell and move. The common features then of migrants from Northwest Europe in the early 19th century, I haven't made this clear enough. It's rural, complete families. And this is a feature of immigration that does change over the century. In the early period, we do see a lot more complete families coming. Later on, we'll see families pursuing a different strategy where they may send 1 or 2 members first. Just as Duden said, that fear of loss of status, but not yet necessarily impoverished and impacted by change in the agricultural economy at the time. Okay. So the term that I introduced at the beginning, quoting Mac Walker, radical attempt to conserve, then, describes what these immigrants are doing. They're fearful of rootlessness,